Summer 2020. American cities burn, not from foreign invasion, not from natural disaster, but from something far more dangerous, a fire that's been smoldering beneath the surface for generations. Over 2,000 cities and towns, nearly $2 billion in insured property damage, the most widespread civil unrest since the 1960s. But this isn't a story about one summer. This is a story about what happens when the promise of a nation collides with the reality of its people. The question isn't why America burned. The question is, why did it take so long? May 25, 2020, 8 p.m., Chicago Avenue, Minneapolis. A convenience store employee calls police about a counterfeit $20 bill. 9 minutes and 29 seconds later, George Floyd is dead, pinned beneath the knee of Officer Derek Chauvin while 3 other officers watch. 17-year-old Darnella Frazier records it all on her phone. Within hours, the video goes viral. Within days, Minneapolis is burning. Within weeks, the world is watching. But George Floyd didn't die in a vacuum. His death was the match, America was the kindling, and the fuel had been piling up for 400 years. To understand 2020, we must go back, not years, centuries. 1863, the New York draft riots. Working-class Americans, many of them Irish immigrants, rage against being conscripted to fight in the Civil War, while wealthy men buy their way out for $300. The city burns for 3 days, over 100 dead. Black neighborhoods are specifically targeted. 1921, Tulsa, Oklahoma. The Greenwood district, known as Black Wall Street, is obliterated. White mobs, some deputized by the city, massacre up to 300 black residents and destroy 35 city blocks of black-owned businesses. The wealthiest black community in America is reduced to ash in 18 hours. 1943, Detroit. White workers walk off their jobs to protest the promotion of 3 black workers at a defense plant. Within days, federal troops occupy the city. 34 dead, a city at war with itself while fighting a war abroad. 1965, Watts, Los Angeles. A routine traffic stop escalates. 6 days of burning, 34 dead, 1,000 buildings destroyed. The pattern repeats. 1967, the long hot summer. 159 race riots sweep America. Detroit burns again, 43 dead, 7,000 arrested. Newark, 26 dead. President Johnson deploys 15,000 troops to American cities. The war in Vietnam comes home. 1968, April 4th, Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated in Memphis. Within hours, 110 American cities erupt. Washington, D.C. burns within view of the Capitol Dome. Federal troops occupy the nation's capital for the first time since the Civil War. 1992, Los Angeles. 4 officers are acquitted in the beating of Rodney King, despite videotape evidence. The city explodes. 63 dead. The Korean-American community, caught between, suffers $400 million in damages, 40% of total losses. Each time, America promises reform. Each time, the fire dies down. Each time, the embers continue to glow. The 21st century brought new technology, body cameras, cell phones, social media. Suddenly, what had always happened in the shadows was broadcast in real time. 2014, Eric Garner, Staten Island. I can't breathe, 11 times. Cell phone video, no indictment. 2014, Michael Brown, Ferguson, Missouri. Unarmed, shot 6 times. The city burns for weeks. The National Guard deploys, no indictment. 2014, Tamir Rice, Cleveland, 12 years old, playing with a toy gun in a park, shot within 2 seconds of police arrival. Surveillance video, no indictment.
2015, Freddie Gray, Baltimore, arrested for possessing a legal knife, severed spine while in police custody. The city erupts. No convictions. 2016, Philando Castile, Minnesota, pulled over for a broken taillight, shot 7 times during a traffic stop. His girlfriend live streams the aftermath on Facebook, her 4-year-old daughter in the back seat. Acquitted. Each case follows a pattern: incident, video, outrage, protest, grand jury, no indictment or acquittal. The pressure builds. But 2020 was different. 2020 was a perfect storm. Spring 2020, America is already burning, metaphorically. A pandemic has killed 100,000 Americans by May. The economy has collapsed. Unemployment reaches levels unseen since the Great Depression. 40 million Americans file for unemployment benefits. The country is locked down, isolated, angry, and afraid. Racial disparities in COVID deaths are stark. Black Americans are dying at twice the rate of white Americans, Native Americans at 2.5 times the rate. The pandemic doesn't discriminate, but America does. People are home, watching, waiting. When Darnella Frazier's video appears on May 26th, the world is watching. Millions are online. Millions are unemployed. Millions are angry. May 27th, Minneapolis. The 3rd Precinct police station burns. Protesters overrun it. Officers evacuate. It's the first time a police precinct has been seized and destroyed during civil unrest in modern American history. May 28th, the protests spread. Louisville, New York, Los Angeles, Atlanta. In Atlanta, CNN's headquarters is attacked. The mayor pleads for calm. By May 30th, protests have erupted in over 140 cities. 40 states and Washington, D.C. deploy the National Guard. 26,000 troops, the largest domestic military deployment since the Civil Rights era. May 1st, President Trump's photo op. Peaceful protesters are tear-gassed and cleared from Lafayette Square so the president can walk to a church and hold up a Bible. The chairman of the Joint Staffs of Defense, General Mark Milley, walks with him in combat fatigues. Milley will later apologize, calling it a mistake that created a perception of the military involved in domestic politics. The fire spreads. What happened next wasn't simple. It never is. By June, between 15 and 26 million Americans participated in Black Lives Matter protests, the largest movement in U.S. history. The vast majority were peaceful, multi-generational, multiracial, Americans from every background demanding accountability. But at night, in some cities, the nature changed. Portland, Oregon, protests at the federal courthouse continue for 100 consecutive nights. Federal agents in unmarked vans detain protesters without identification. The images look dystopian, unreal. Kenosha, Wisconsin, August 23rd. Jacob Blake is shot 7 times in the back by police in front of his children. The city burns. August 25th. Kyle Rittenhouse, a 17-year-old from Illinois, crosses state lines with an AR-15. He kills 2 protesters and wounds another. The nation divides over whether he's a murderer or defending himself. A jury will later acquit him. Seattle. Protesters establish the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, CHAZ. 6 blocks of the city are declared independent from police jurisdiction. It lasts 24 days before shootings and violence lead to its dismantling. The narrative fractures. Are these protests or riots? Peaceful demonstrations or insurrections? The answer depends on who you ask, what you watch, what you believe. Insurance claims tell one story: $1 to $2 billion in damages, the most expensive civil unrest in American history. But arrest records tell another: 94% of protests involved no property damage.
Over 10,000 arrests, Numerous incidents of police violence against protesters and journalists documented. Two truths exist simultaneously. Most protests were peaceful. Some cities burned. But here's where the story gets complicated. In city after city, a question emerged. Who was actually burning buildings? Minneapolis. The first structure to burn wasn't burned by locals. Ivan Harrison Hunter, a member of the right-wing extremist group Boogaloo Boys, traveled from Texas to Minneapolis. Surveillance footage shows him firing 13 rounds from an AK-47 into the 3rd Precinct while shouting, "Justice for Floyd." He was later arrested and pleaded guilty. In Las Vegas, 3 members of the Boogaloo movement were arrested for firebombing federal buildings during protests, attempting to frame the violence on Black Lives Matter. In Oakland, 2 Air Force sergeants were arrested for the murder of a federal security officer during protests. One was linked to the Boogaloo movement. They had planned to use the chaos of protests as cover. Federal investigations revealed networks of white supremacist groups and far-right accelerationists had mobilized across the country, not to counter-protest, but to escalate, to accelerate what they hoped would be a race war. Meanwhile, in Seattle, Portland, and other cities, anarchist groups and far-left factions engaged in their own campaigns of property destruction, believing institutional damage was justified. The truth? There was no single movement, no central organization. The uprising was a collision of legitimate grief, opportunistic criminality, political extremism from multiple directions, and the largest protest movement in American history, all happening simultaneously. America wasn't just divided, it was fragmented. Beyond the politics, beyond the property damage, people died. At least 25 people died during the protests and unrest. David Dorn, a 77-year-old retired police captain in St. Louis, shot while protecting a friend's pawn shop. Italia Marie Kelly, 22, shot in Davenport, Iowa. Chris Beatty, 38, former Indiana University football player, shot in Indianapolis while trying to protect others. David McAtee, 53, a Louisville barbecue vendor known for feeding police officers for free, shot and killed by National Guard and police during a dispersion operation. His security camera captured his final moments. He was preparing food. Jonna Floyd, George's 6-year-old daughter, told the world, "Daddy changed the world, but the world hasn't finished changing." April 20th, 2021, Minneapolis. Derek Chauvin is convicted on all counts: second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and manslaughter. He receives 22.5 years. The 3 other officers are later convicted on federal charges. For once, accountability. But one conviction doesn't reverse history. In the uprising's wake, dozens of cities defund or restructure police departments. Minneapolis pledges to dismantle its police department entirely, a pledge later walked back. New York cuts $1 billion from NYPD budget, funding largely restored within a year. Qualified immunity, the legal doctrine protecting officers from civil liability, remains largely intact. Efforts to reform it at the federal level fail. The April 20th, 2021 George Floyd Justice in Policing Act passes the House. It dies in the Senate. Partisan division turns even George Floyd's name into a political weapon. Some changes stick. Body cameras expand, no-knock warrants are restricted in some jurisdictions, chokeholds are banned in many departments, training is reformed. But in 2021, 1,055 people are killed by police, more than 2020. In 2022, 1,096. In 2023, over 1,100.
the killings continue. And the political backlash comes. Law and order messages resonate. Crime rises in many cities during the pandemic, though not universally. The narrative shifts. By 2022, even cities that promised reform are refunding police departments. The fire burned hot and fast, but did it burn long enough? Today, the fires have died down. The National Guard has left. The boarded-up windows have been replaced. Life continues. George Floyd Square in Minneapolis remains, a memorial, a reminder. Tourists visit. Locals debate whether it should be permanent. The movement continues, but fragmented. Black Lives Matter, once united, splinters into competing factions. Questions about finances and leadership emerge. The energy dissipates, but doesn't disappear. Tyree Nichols, Memphis, January 2023, beaten to death by 5 black police officers. The video is released. Protests occur, but not fires. The pattern persists, but the response has changed. America is exhausted. The data remains stark. Black Americans are 3 times more likely to be killed by police than white Americans. Native Americans twice as likely. The system that created George Floyd's death still exists, reformed around the edges, but intact at its core. But something did change. Millions of Americans who had never thought about police violence, systemic racism, or qualified immunity can now define those terms. The conversation itself shifted. The question isn't whether the summer of 2020 solved America's problems. It didn't. The question is whether America will remember what it learned when the flames were visible, or forget when the smoke clears. America has burned before. It will burn again. Not because Americans are violent, but because fire is what happens when pressure has no release, when grief has no justice, when promises remain broken generation after generation. The summer of 2020 wasn't an aberration, it was a continuation, another chapter in a story that began before this nation was founded and continues to this day. George Floyd is dead. Derek Chauvin is in prison. The cities have been rebuilt. But the question that sparked the flames remains unanswered. What does justice look like in America? And who decides? The fire is out. The embers still glow.